Hey guys, it's your host, Bailey Cartwright. Welcome to the Stronger Scars podcast, where I invite others to dive deep into the ups and downs of physical and mental scars. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Stronger Scars podcast. Today I am joined with Cameron Poole, and he is currently a freshman at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. And he was born with a form of spina bifida. And I'm going to kind of let him introduce himself. He has a really awesome, unique story, and I'm just really excited to have you on here. So welcome, Cameron.
Great, thank you. It's an honor to be here. So I appreciate the opportunity.
So kind of walk us through, let's just start with your life. You sent me this really awesome, I asked Cameron to send me just a little snippet of his life, and he sent me this really, I can just tell you're like a funny dude because just the way you typed things, so I'm just really excited to hear your story from your perspective. But let's take it back to when you were born. Obviously, you're not going to have the most knowledge of firsthand, but you have all these things that people in your life that you love have told you. So kind of just walk us through from starting, when you were wee little.
Great. Well, yeah, I was born October 2nd, 2002. I was born in the DC area, so I can't remember if it's Virginia or, all that stuff. Like I said, I don't have the greatest memory when I was first born. But yeah, so no, apparently my parents have always said I've always been very involved in sports. For example, my grandparents bought me a little stuffed basketball, and I would roll that and pass it back and forth with my parents and everything like that. So I've always been very active, very involved in sports and everything like that. Yeah, I got my first wheelchair when I was about 2 years old, and that was actually the day my sister was born, Jenna. So she's the middle sister, and then I have another sister as well. And yeah, no, it's just been great. I mean, I've had a fantastic support system through them, and yeah, I can't really ask for a much better family to be born to.
So kind of walk us through what your diagnosis was and what that means for your life. Because a lot of people, I feel like, I mean, I'm undereducated too. I don't know all of the, things that could possibly give someone a disability. So kind of just if you can, explain that to the listeners.
Yeah, well, it'll probably be best to explain mine. So spina bifida, when the skin around like your back around the spinal cord doesn't fully close all the way. So for me, that allowed nerves kind of sneak out and create a fatty tumor where all the nerves are kind of like held up, bunched up, and all that kind of stuff. So the signals from my brain don't exactly go all the way down to like my legs, my feet. So I can't move my toes at all. I can't move, my feet. I can't bend them, anything like that. So that's pretty much led me to where I have to use a day chair or a wheelchair to get around, and I can't walk at all. So that's about, yeah. And then the thing with spina bifida is like most every disability, it's going to affect everybody a little bit differently. So, for example, I know actually a women's player on the women's team here at University of Wisconsin-Whitewater that has spina bifida as well, but she can walk around. So yeah, it's just kind of, it's really different for every case. So it's kind of hard to put something like a disability in a box, so to speak. So yeah, that's my story.
Right. And one of the things I obviously this podcast is so the first person I had on when I kind of relaunched it last year her name was Monica Messacar, and she went to Notre Dame with me, and she was in wheelchair daily. And it was just really interesting to hear that perspective, because a lot of the people that I have on here are able-bodied athletes who are never really exposed to the everyday challenges that someone who with a disability goes through. And that's why I think it's so interesting and so important to have people on here with disabilities, because okay, athletes are great and having an able body is great, but somebody with a disability is, going through the same challenges as an athlete. And I want to talk about, I think I was kind of looking up wheelchair basketball more. That has to be so hard, because not only are you playing basketball, but you're wheeling yourself around, correct?
That's correct.
Kind of explain to the listeners what is involved in wheelchair basketball.
So at the collegiate level for wheelchair basketball, actually, we practice like any other college team. So we're up Monday through Friday, 6:30 to 8:30. We're expected to get 2 lifts in a week. although most of our guys get in every day, 3 days of lifts and then 2 days of cardio. And then we're supposed to get a scrimmage like thing in 3 times a week. So it's a very interactive sport. So we, just because we have a disability doesn't mean we're taking it easy or anything like that. So, we're still, I'm in the gym 5 hours, 5 days a week during the heart of the season, everything like that. Um, yeah. So, and actually, wheelchair basketball, for me, I find it interesting how you kind of explain how it may be very challenging to push myself around, but in a way that's how I've lived my entire life, right? So
Right.
I've always been pushing myself around. So it's kind, I guess it would kind of be like able-bodied basketball for people that can walk and that kind of stuff. Like for me, I'm looking at them, I'm like, how in the world are they running around their little legs that long? I can't even stand up for a second, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like that. I've kind of gotten used to it. It's kind of just been built into my thing. So my life.
Right. I think that's really, really important for people to hear because, you know, I was talking to my husband about, I was telling him about the episode we were going to do. And I said, I wanted to bring up how I think a lot of times an able body looks at someone with a disability and wants to feel pity on them because it looks different than what they're used to. And he was like, no, I don't want you to like make it sound offensive. And I'm like, I'm not sounding offensive. I think it's a generalized thing that most people would look at someone with a disability and feel bad for them. But correct me if I'm wrong, but the people who I know with disabilities, they want to be treated like anybody else. That is what they know. That's their life. So what's your take on that?
Oh, well, I 100% agree. One of like the most common questions that I get, or I've heard other people get with disabilities, is kind of like, if you could take a magic pill that would, allow you to walk and remove your disability, would you take it? And my response to that question is like, if you could take a magic pill that would give you a disability, would you take it? And almost everybody says no. Why would I? And so that's kind of my response to them. Why would I? Right? Because I've lived my entire life with a disability, or people that become disabled later down the line are like, this is my life, and there's not a magic pill out there. And even if there was, I wouldn't take it because I've learned to adapt. I've learned to live my life with a disability. So that's kind of become who I am and a part of me. I'm just living my life like anybody else. I have my GED just like my fellow classmates got, and I'm working towards my college diploma right now. So why would I? What would I change?
Right. I mean, that's a great answer. And, obviously, I mean, it's hard because in the world we live in, everyone's going to have their own opinion. People are going to judge people. That's just how things are. But I think, you're dealt cards and you deal with them. You get through it. And it sounds like you have an amazing support system and like you, you are where you are today because of the challenges you were given. And like, it's not for anyone else to say how you're living your life because it seems like you're doing pretty dang good.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. I'm here today because of the challenge I was given, but I also because of the opportunities I were provided because of my disability. And I also feel like that's kind of important to highlight.
Mhm.
Having a disability isn't all challenges. That's actually we get a lot of opportunities. For example, I had the opportunity to go scuba diving down in the Cayman Islands for a group that's kind of like about adaptive and living on your own and that kind of stuff. And I went there, when I was in high school to kind of get a feel for it. I absolutely loved it. I love being independent, and that I've talked to my parents about this, and that they've always said that was their goal, is to get me to be as independent as possible. And I'm just grateful for that because at the end of the day, I'm just another guy
Right.
going down the street trying to live his life. So
Well, thank you for highlighting that. I just, it's something that I will never experience because I wasn't born with a disability, but I try to, be able to put myself in other people's shoes and realize like he's just like me. We have different bodies, we have different abilities, but he's a person just like me. And I feel like that is what, by having you on here, by having conversations, I want other people to kind of learn that.
I was just gonna say that overall, and kind of going back to that kind of thing is people with disabilities 90% of the time are just going to rather have somebody ask a question than just assume something, right? Because we all know what assuming makes out of you and me. And so I'd rather have somebody ask me a silly question than to make, an assumption about something. So
All right. Great. Yeah. It's interesting. It's very refreshing to hear from you just because it is something sometimes we dance around because we're afraid to ask questions. But I that's great to hear that you would rather someone just ask you and, have that honest conversation. So
Yeah.
you brought up the independence thing, and I think that's something I want to highlight on. I know you talked about you had an aide growing up and you were really close with her. I forget her name, but kind of talk about what this transition has looked like for you from growing up and always having your family, having an aide, always just having people right by your side to help you, and then going off to college and doing life by yourself.
Yeah, so well, my aide's name is Chris Gasparini, and she was a huge part of my life. She was my aide from preschool until I graduated high school. She was fantastic. I absolutely loved her. I can't. We're still in contact today, thankfully. So, and I couldn't have asked for a better aide. So kind of like I'll kind of work my way from preschool to high school and then kind of go through college if that's okay. So preschool, she was really there, a lot. She was by my side, just trying to figure out how things work and that kind of stuff, how I would, manage through school. And, just like every other kid in preschool is trying to figure out that new, you're away from your parents, that transition from always having your mom by your side or your dad by your side to, you know, being being at school for a few hours a day. And then as the years got on, she was still there for me 100%, but she kind of gave me that space. She gave me that independence, which was absolutely fantastic because I always knew that I was making my own decisions and I was doing my own things and I was hanging out with friends and I was having fun and I was on my own. But if I ever needed help with anything or something that I had a concern over, I could always go to her and talk to her. So she was always there for me without always being right beside me, if that kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
So that really helped with my transition from high school and everything like that to college. And quite honestly, I absolutely love the independence. Um, I'm a huge fan of it. So it's just fantastic. It's refreshing that to kind of know that everything that everyone has helped me towards my entire life is paying off. And you can really see how that's paying off here in college.
Yeah, I college was the best time of my life, so enjoy it. um, but I'm interested with the school you go to. So I know you mentioned there was also a girls wheelchair basketball team, correct? So are
Right.
there a lot of sports based around disability? Like, is that just like the school is just kind of explain that to me? Because I went to Notre Dame, like there was no such thing as like a sport for those with disability. And I think that is so cool that you get to go and have that opportunity.
Oh, it absolutely is. So I remember when I was first playing wheelchair basketball, there was only a handful of, collegiate teams, and that had always been my goal as a kid to come play wheelchair basketball in college. And as I gotten older, more and more schools started to have them. So Whitewater's not the only school. There's also Illinois, Alabama, um, Michigan starting a team, or Eastern Washington, sorry, not Michigan, Eastern Washington starting a team, that kind of stuff. So the sport is really growing. It really is expanding. And it's just kind of the school in specific isn't focused around people with disabilities, but they're inclusive of people with disabilities, if that kind of makes sense.
Right.
So it's like we have a wheelchair basketball team and we have a women's wheelchair basketball team, and those are about the only wheel, uh, adaptive sports that the school currently has.
Right.
But they're starting to look into more programs like tennis, wheelchair tennis, and everything. So everything can be adapted. So we're not focused on disability, we're inclusive of disability. And I feel like that's really important to highlight because every school can do that, right? You don't need to drop everything to focus on a wheelchair basketball team. You can do a wheelchair basketball team while you still have your able-bodied basketball team,
Right.
baseball team, soccer team,
Right.
whatever it may be. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's very, very important. I think I agree. I mean, whatever the reason that more schools don't have it, so be it. But like you said, it's something that you could really make people feel like they belong by simply
Mhm.
highlighting, what they have, what they've been dealt with. Um, and so I'm curious, this is something I think is important that I want to ask you. Do you feel, because like I know on my campus, there are very few people with wheelchairs with disabilities. And I think that those people felt really isolated. I can only imagine how hard it was. It's not easy to look different than other people. is that something that you experience, or since you have teammates and this community, is that easier, or do you still feel that way at times?
Good question. Personally, I've felt that way before. It's always been, I've just been kind of part of the group. I've always had great friends in elementary school, high school, and I was able to, be a part of it. I think a big thing to highlight too is my teachers always expected the same amount of work from me, no matter what. So that really helped me feel, included, and just like every other student, they weren't lowering their standards because I was in a wheelchair. They actually kept it the same. And I feel like that's also important, for teachers out there as well. If I'm becoming just to, realize you have a student with a physical disability that doesn't have cognitive disability. And, if they do, there's ways to adapt your classroom without isolating the student from the classroom. So no, thankfully, I've had great people in my life, great teachers, great, administration and everything like that, that really helped me feel included. My teachers here do the same thing. They expect the same work out of me. They don't lower their standards just because they see I'm in a wheelchair. I feel like that's a big part of why I feel so included, and I'm not feeling like an outcast almost.
So yeah, I think that's something that if you're listening to this, and I know we've kind of talked about this a few minutes ago, but if you are an able-bodied person and you see somebody with a disability, like, one, you don't have to like freak out and be like, oh, I need to make sure that, like, you need to be, how do I want to word this? Like, there's a difference between like making them feel different and making them feel included. I think that's the point I want to make here. Obviously, like, as human beings, we need to be nice people, like be nice to them, hold the door, like that kind of thing goes a long way, but you don't need to make them feel like they're any different than you.
Right. Kind of like hold the door just because you're being nice. Don't hold the door just because they're in a wheelchair type thing.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I don't know. I appreciate you being open with that, because it's easy to have stereotypes and have the stigma around what things may be for someone who you're not.
Mhm.
Okay, let's talk more basketball, because obviously this has been a huge part of your life. So kind of walk us through, growing up playing wheelchair basketball, and then, like, what was it like to decide you were going to play in college, like get to finally make that decision, all your hard work's paid off?
Yeah, so I was first introduced to wheelchair basketball when I was about 4 years old, I want to say. I started playing when I was about 6. So I've been playing for about 13 years now, and it's just been fantastic. It's been an amazing, just athletic outlet, basically. So I've always been athletic. I've done sports through wheelchair basketball, swimming, skiing, a little bit water skiing, but I really focused on wheelchair basketball just because of the team aspect of the whole thing, just how included I felt with everything, and the fact that I'm competing against other people in wheelchairs. My teammates are, other people in wheelchairs. And then kind of on the contrary to that, to give you guys an example, with swimming, it wasn't my favorite sport. And that's mainly because I would have to say when I was practicing, despite being, one of the fastest in the adaptive world, when I was practicing with able bodies, I was usually in one of the slower lanes. And so it was a weird dynamic, I guess I want to say. But with wheel basketball, um, I guess I've always been really able to show my skill and my knowledge of the game because I was on a level playing field with everybody else in the sport. So I kind of always knew I wanted to play in college. Ever since I was, really little, and I went to my first camp when I was about 7 years old, which was actually at University of Wisconsin Whitewater. So that kind of made me fall in love with the school, and I fell in love with the people here and just the program as a whole. And yeah, I just kept working, kept pushing myself. Always wanted to be better, student of the game type thing. I just kept playing, and then finally, when the day I signed with the school, it was just like a dream come true almost.
Mhm.
And now that I'm here and I just I finished up my first season, I'm still kind of processing it, if that makes sense. It's like I just lived out my dream and it was fantastic, and I've still got 3 more years of it. So now really I'm setting, my next goal, and that's the international level Team USA stuff. But yeah, so it's really been a driving factor for me to, get good at wheelchair basketball, stay good at wheelchair basketball, but also focus on grades and realize academics are, just as important you're a student athlete, not a athletic student, although, sure, whatever, but so
School's
that
more
kind of stuff.
important. School's more
Yeah, yeah,
important.
yeah.
um, yeah, so I always creep on my guests. I have to find out all the good things about them. And I came across an article talking about your experience going to try out for Team USA. So
Mhm.
I honestly just want to hear your perspective on, how that was. I know you didn't make the team, correct?
Right.
But I mean, just getting there and being invited to go there has to feel so rewarding in itself. So, what was that experience like? And I know you're probably not going to like talk highly of yourself, but I know you're also the only freshman on your team to be starting, right?
Yes.
So like you're killing it. So kind of talk about that experience.
Yeah, the tryout for Team USA was honestly just breathtaking almost. Just being there and I was the youngest guy there, and just so having that opportunity to go to the tryout for that, and just being in the same room, playing at the same level, playing against some of the best players, I could in the country, in the world almost, is fantastic. It was such a surreal experience, and it was so cool just to be invited to compete at that level.
Right.
Um, so, and I'm right. I mean, even though I didn't make it, really, that's just the beginning of my journey for all that stuff. Because I was able to get an invite so young, it's like now I know what I'm looking for. Now I can kind of focus in on my focuses, I guess, to know what I should work on, that type of stuff, and just the opportunities that wheelchair basketball has provided, and in turn, being in a wheelchair has provided, are just I couldn't ask for anything better.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
wouldn't change it for the world.
That's awesome. And when are the next? Because wasn't there just a Paralympics? I don't remember.
Yeah, Tokyo, I think, was
Right.
2021.
Okay, so
So
the next one's
2024.
okay. All
So
right.
yeah, usually it's every 4 years, but because of COVID and
Over the
everything,
hit
got
three.
delayed. Yep. Yep.
Interesting. I definitely have seen like, I as an athlete, I love watching the Olympics and Paralympics. And I remember growing up, we would watch like the wheelchair basketball and it's very intense.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like very intense. Like you guys are pushing each other, like
Yeah, it's a very physical sport. So, and you get people falling over all the time. And just because someone fell on the floor, the game doesn't stop, unless they're in danger. But if somebody falls over in the back, you just kind of go, all right, sweet. Now we have a numbers advantage, and you just leave them on the ground. So, and
no
at the
way.
collegiate level, yep, yeah, and at the collegiate level, most guys are able to, push themselves back up with in their chair, and so then they have to hustle back. But it's a physical sport, and that's part of the reason I absolutely love it. So
Right.
we're not out there giving each other hugs. We're out there, knocking each other over.
Right.
So,
So are like the positions the same, I would assume?
um, we kind of have what's called like a guard, and then you usually have your height because you can't jump in wheelchair basketball. Height is a huge part of the game.
Okay.
And so usually your taller guys are a bit slower, and then I'm one of your shorter guys, so I'll be a bit faster. And then our job is to just, work with our speed and our chair skills, and able to turn super small, super tight, and get our big guys inside the key so they can go ahead, shoot up, miss 50 baskets, grab the rebound 50 times, and then, make the shot. So,
Yeah, that sounds
but
like it sounds fun and like, you know, and I'm gonna keep going back to this, but like to you guys, that is basketball. It's not wheelchair basketball like it is, but like that's what you know.
yeah, yeah, whenever we're like, hey, let's go play some basketball. It's,
Right.
what we're playing. It's
Right.
wheelchair basketball, but to us, it's basketball.
All right. So I'm curious on your take on this, and you may not want to or have an answer, but is mental health, I feel like in light of like a lot of what athletes are struggling with in today's world, is mental
Mhm.
health a topic of discussion on your team? And is that something you struggled with?
That's a good question. Obviously, if somebody is having an issue, we are going to be there for each other, and we're kind of always going to support each other and have that, that backing with each other. I wouldn't say we don't talk about it daily on our team, but if something were to come up, we would discuss it. We would be there. We would work with each other. Personally, I've not experienced anything like that, so I don't have any input on, what it's like. And I don't want to go out there and assume what it's like, right? That's the that's the goal. So that's about all I have to say on that issue, on that topic.
Right. And this is another thing. I don't know, you obviously know better than I do, but I think that when we see somebody with a disability, we assume that like they have it so tough and like
Mhm.
they must really be struggling. And that's another stigma. I don't think that's the case. I mean, not all the time. I'm sure it's like anyone else. Like, yeah, you're going to have your people with disability who are struggling, just like I've struggled and other people have struggled. It's no different.
Right, for sure. So it's like, just because you see somebody with a disability, it doesn't always mean they're going to be struggling or anything like that. But it kind of goes, the same, just because I see somebody walking around doesn't mean they're going to be struggling with, mental health or something like that. So it's kind of goes both ways, I guess. Just because somebody is something doesn't mean they are something.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I want to hear your perspective. What are just like some of the general challenges, growing up and in your life today? Like, what are some of the daily challenges that you, as someone with a disability, face?
Oh, geez. I'll probably say the super long hill I have to push up to get back to my dorm. No, but uh, that's a pretty good question. Let me think. Well, I mean, always, because we live in a world that is, mostly, or I should say, the majority of people don't have a disability. Is sometimes the world doesn't always adapt to you, so you kind of have to adapt to the world, if that makes sense. So, like for example, and every time and my scare my parents when I do this, but love them to death. And when there'd be a bowl in a cabinet counter or something like that, one of the taller cabinets where I couldn't reach, I'd climb up, push myself out of my chair, sit on the counter, and then reach up to grab a bowl out of the high cabinet. And my mom's like, Cameron, what are you doing? She's worried about, like every parent would be. And they're kind of like, what's going on? So, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I just like that story just because it kind of shows that, your parents are still going to worry about you no matter
Right.
what.
Right.
But just, yeah, so I like that kind of highlight that, the world doesn't always adapt to us. So sometimes we have to adapt to the world. Like there may be a bowl in a high cabinet where you climb on the counter to get it.
Right.
So I feel like there's always little struggles, but I feel like most of the time I don't realize them just because I've gotten so used to adapting around them that they've kind of become just part of my daily routine and not really a daily struggle.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very crucial. And I mean, it's just interesting for me to kind of talk to you in here because what I love about, like, I always like, this is one of the things I always go down the spiral in my head is like there's so many people in the world and we all have our own story. And it's just like crazy to me when I get to talk to people and meet new people and like think like I'm going about my everyday life and they're going about their everyday life. And it's so like we just have such a difference and like no two stories are alike. And that blows my mind away. I don't really have any more questions, but I kind of just want to talk about like your life now. Like what are you doing? Like let us know like how you're doing now, like where life's going for you.
Yeah, so it's going on the up and up, I'd say. I've just finished up my first year, so I've got finals coming up in just a few days, and then I'll be done with my first year of college. So that kind of flew by. Um, I'll still be playing wheelchair basketball over the summer, just staying in shape, that kind of stuff. As opportunities present themselves, I'll absolutely grab it. Anyone I'd like to, and I'm just gonna keep going forward. So, and I'm just gonna keep going with it.
Right. And I don't remember if I was recording when we were talking about this, but Cameron is an education major,
Mhm.
elementary education. And I obviously don't know you very well, but just from talking to you, I think you're going to make such a good teacher because not only do you have like all of these tools that you've developed through your life, but I just feel like you're a good person and like you're going to really help change people's lives.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, it's like I've always been like, the world needs, those that inspire. And if that's the reason I'm in a wheelchair and that's the reason I have a disability, then great, I'll embrace it. So I feel like everybody on this world's got a purpose. And, once you find yours and, it may take a lifetime to find it, but once you do, you're going to be a lot, a lot more satisfied with the choices you make, and you're going to have a lot more direction with the choices you make. So,
Right. And I think a lot of things, a lot of challenges in our lives, it's all about perspective. And if you can stay positive, if you can have a good perspective, I know it's not always easy, but I don't know if you want to speak on this, but having an insight and a perspective that is positive and in the right direction for yourself is the biggest game changer.
oh yeah, for sure. So I mean, especially with my situation is no matter what, I'm not going to change it. So, just if I go around and I'm grumpy or, I'm mad about the fact that I'm in a wheelchair all the time, at the end of the day, when I wake up the next day, or when I go to bed, I'm still going to be in a wheelchair. I'm still going to get out of my wheelchair and go into bed. And in the morning, first thing I'm going to do is get in my wheelchair. So why be grumpy or why be, have a negative outlook at that if you can't change it? And so, it's just easier to be positive about the whole thing. It really helps with everything. And then the whole time, instead of waking up with a frown on your face, you're waking up with a smile. So,
Okay, my last question. I always like to ask people this. But if someone listening to this, whether they were also born with a disability or something later on in their life happens and they become disabled, what advice or what would you tell them?
um,
It's a loaded
I
question.
would, it is. I would probably tell them to think and ask the question, why me? And I'm not saying ask that question in a negative way, in a resentful way. I would say ask it in a positive way. Why am I in a wheelchair? What is my purpose? Why did I become disabled? Why do I now have a disability? Once you find that, and you can narrow your answer down, is it to give those around me inspiration? Is it to give those around me perspective? Just when you find, is it to give those around me? Is it to have the opportunity to come on a podcast and talk to people? Is it the opportunity to start a podcast and inspire people? And once you kind of find those answers for yourself, it's going to put everything in a new light, and you're gonna kind of see yourself why. And then, once you answer that big question, why me, then you're gonna be able to make decisions surrounding that answer and really help inspire or change the lives of others in ways that you may have not been able to without a disability.
I love that answer. So I'm going to give you a little, I don't know if you looked up Stronger Scars or whatever, but a little background on myself and Stronger Scars. So basically, I mean, I was good at soccer growing up. I was always pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to go and play D1 soccer. Amazing. And I got there and I was diagnosed with compartment syndrome. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But basically, it ended up being, I didn't know at the time it was going to be a career ending injury pretty much. I had 4 surgeries. It was just a disaster. And
Right.
I was so mad. And I said, not in the positive way, in the spiteful way, I said, why me? Why am I the person who finally got to go play college soccer and now I don't get to play? And I have
Right.
to watch my teammates play and all these other things. And I wouldn't change like you said, your disability, you wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't change my injury for the world because it gave me so much. But at the same time, if I could go back and change my perspective and change the way I asked that why me question, I would have had a lot of less time of hurt and a lot less time of being spiteful and jealous. So I love that you brought that up because I vividly remember saying why me, but in the negative way.
Well, yeah, there you go. And now you're making podcasts, inspiring people around the world. So
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I always like to say pain is pain. Obviously, you have a disability, you can't change it. My injury, to me, that is a big thing. People with injuries who are able bodies, their injuries are a big thing. It's all relative. Everyone's going through their own crap. And like you said, if you can just have a positive perspective on it, positive outlook, it's not only going to benefit yourself, but it's going to benefit those people around you.
right.
Have you ever been injured while playing?
No. So actually, for how physical wheelchair basketball is, you don't really see it injuries.
Really?
So the biggest one you see is just rotator cuff stuff, but that's just
Right.
because of how much we push and we're using our shoulders. You may have the occasional concussion just like any other sport out there, but
Emotional.
you know, yeah, just it's whatever. Anyway, no, but yeah, no, for how physical it is, we don't see a lot of injuries, thankfully.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would have definitely expected you to say that you've been hurt in some shape or form.
Yeah, no, I've jammed a few fingers here and there, but nothing crazy.
Oh yeah, that probably hurts so bad.
Yeah, it's not a lot of fun.
Right. Um, all right. Well, do you have any questions for me?
That's good. Well, I do have one question for you, and that's why did you decide to start your podcast? So, we're always talking
Uh,
about purpose and everything. So what did you feel like? What was the calling that made you decide I want to do this?
so I started it my sophomore year of college. So I've been out of college for a year now, so I don't even know whatever that math is, but um basically I just like was really struggling with my mental health after my injury, and like I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt like I don't know, I just in the world of athletics, it's all go go go, who's the best, and that's pretty much all that feels like it matters. And that's what I was used to growing up to. And then when I got hurt and couldn't play, that was gone. And I just felt really lonely, and I don't know, I was just confused. So I figured if I'm feeling this way, obviously other people are feeling that way. So then I just kind of worked with our media department at Notre Dame, and they helped me figure it out and started the podcast. But I'm someone who really believes in just giving people a voice and like an outlet. Like, take me and my name away from it. It's not about like me promoting Bailey Cartwright. It's about me promoting these stories, these people who feel like they don't have a voice all the time, people who aren't the starters, aren't the national team athletes. Sometimes all we want is, we crave people wanting to hear about us. We want to have our moment. And I feel like sometimes just getting to post about somebody or talk to them on a podcast is giving them that moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But so thank you. Seriously, thank you so much for coming on here and being honest and open. Do you enjoy talking about like what you've been through, or are you kind of more on the shy side? I can't really tell. Like you seem really like talkative.
Yeah, obviously if people are going to ask me questions, and if they ask questions, I'll be more than happy to answer it. But I'm also not going to go into a room and just start, telling my story and everything like that. So like I said, if people ask questions, that's fantastic. I absolutely want them to ask questions. I feel like most people with disabilities do, because that's, it's a lot better to have that sit down and have that discussion, and kind of help educate people. But at the same time, it's not who I am, if that makes sense. It's a part of me, but it's not who I am. So
Right.
it's not, my disability isn't all there is to me.
Yep.
That's the way I'll throw that out there. So my disability isn't all there is to me. It is a part of me, but it isn't me. So,
Right. Yeah. That's
I don't know if that made any sense.
yeah,
But
no, that's so important because you're not Cameron Poole, a kid with a disability. You're Cameron Poole.
right, exactly.
And I just, if you guys, the listeners, if you get anything from this podcast, just kind of like, I don't know. I know we're in like a culture where everyone's always like, educate yourself. I don't even think you need to educate yourself. Just like, don't be a bad person. Like if you see someone with a disability, be like a normal person, be like, hey, like, ask them, or like, if you're curious, ask them. If you're not, like, you don't need to look at them in a different way. You just go about your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're going
Yeah,
about
it's like, right, for sure. Like that whole call to educate yourself. I almost see it as not educate yourself, but be willing to be educated. So be willing to ask those questions and to listen to those stories, and to really think about those answers. So, I'm not saying everybody go out there and research every disability there is and know everything about, because there's way too much of that, right? I'm not going to go out there and research the entire history of everybody that could ever walk.
right.
So I don't expect people to go out there and research the entire history of everybody with a disability, but just be willing and to ask those questions and to be educated rather than, fearful or to turn away, or to be shy of the subject. If you just go at it, most of the time, people with disabilities are just going to come right back at you. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all I have. Again, seriously, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. So it's fantastic.